what's important as you're going into perimenopause and menopause. And a lot of younger women will follow me too, let's say on TikTok, and they're like, okay, I'm listening. And the reason why it's important that we look at we take charge of our health when we're younger is because we really want to make sure that we're managing our stress levels. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our adrenals, because when we go into perimenopause and menopause and our ovaries take that long needed break that they deserve, our adrenal glands take over for helping to make some of our hormones or most of our hormones. So we really want to make sure that we are managing stress levels and making sure that we're eating a whole foods diet, making sure that we're avoiding the processed sugars and the refined carbohydrates, because all of that will have a massive impact on how we go through it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and today I'm interviewing Andrea Donsky. She has been in the health and wellness space for over 20 years. She's a nutritionist, an entrepreneur, and very passionate about women's health, and specifically women's health after menopause. So that's where the focus is going to be for this interview today. If you don't already follow her on TikTok, definitely go check her out there if that's a platform you use. And then just to let you know, she is also hosting a free menopause shift summit coming out really soon when this interview goes live. So we will drop a link to that below. So before we dive in, I wanted to let you know she's authored 3 books, and those are Unjunk Your Junk Food, and then Label Lessons, Your Guide to a Healthy Shopping Cart, and Label Lessons, Unjunk Your Kids' Lunchbox. So we're going to be talking about some of those ingredients she really recommends looking out for to optimize our health. We're also talking about how to reduce hot flashes and then other lifestyle changes that can be really helpful to get rid of that stubborn menopause belly fat and maintain a healthy weight as we age. So Andrea, thank you so much for joining us today. I am so excited to dive into this interview.
No, I'm so happy to be here, and thanks for having me on. So yeah, I've been in the health and wellness industry for 22 years, so pretty much an OG in the space. And it started out initially because I was having digestive issues and I really wanted to take charge of my own health. And then fast forward 18 years, then I started having perimenopausal symptoms. And I didn't actually know I was having perimenopausal symptoms until like 5 years into perimenopause. And I got my first hot flash and I was like, wait, maybe all these symptoms I've been experiencing since I was 42 till I was 47 actually have to do with menopause. And that's what really led me down this path to understand what we're going through at this phase of life, because a lot of, I didn't really talk about it. I didn't really hear about it a lot. And being in the health and nutrition space, I thought, well, I know a lot about my body, but I knew absolutely nothing about menopause or perimenopause. And that's really what led me to start researching it like crazy. I'm an avid researcher and just starting to understand what women were going through at this phase and how to help them.
Yeah. So what did you learn? I mean, from your research, what were kind of the main points that you learned about perimenopause and menopause that you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this 5 years earlier or even longer?
Oh, I would say number one is that, when I remember having a conversation with a woman, probably, maybe, 6 years ago, let's say, and I knew I wanted to start going down this path of menopause or researching menopause. And she was saying, oh yeah, I think there's like 40 different symptoms of menopause. And I was like, wow, that sounds like a lot. But then what I started to do was, because I listen to women, I do my research, whether it's looking and researching into a medical journal or whether I'm speaking to women or listening on social media or even using myself. I always say I use myself as an N of 1 when it comes to research, because then I learn and then share everything I can with everybody who is following me on social media or even my family and my friends. And what I found is that there are in fact more than double that amount of signs and symptoms. And there's over 85, like there's way over 85, but I have personally tracked 85 plus myself. So I created this document and every time I hear of a new one, I go in and I add it and I research it. So at this point, I think what surprised me the most is that there are over 85 different signs and symptoms of menopause. And the reason I say signs and symptoms and not just symptoms, is because symptoms denotes a disease and menopause is not a disease. It's a phase of life. So I like to say signs and symptoms, but just for, and for, I guess, to understand it clearly, we understand the word symptoms, but really it's signs and symptoms of it.
So you said 85.
Over 85. And I've listed all of them on my website, which is wearemorphus, morphus.com. metamorphosis, us, like kind of morph us. So Morphus is the name of our company, which I thought was really, I love it. I love the name because we're a community of women going through this together. We need the support of one another and we're always learning from each other, right? So that's kind of how we came up with our name.
So I think that we've covered some of the major symptoms and signs of kind of perimenopause and menopause on the podcast before. Obviously, irregular periods. So menopause, can you just kind of give us the accurate definition of what menopause is? And then let's talk about some of the more unusual signs and symptoms of menopause.
Sure. So premenopause is before perimenopause. It's our fertility years. Then we've
Okay.
got perimenopause, which can be anywhere from 2 to 12 years before menopause. Menopause is once you've gone 12 months without a cycle. It's actually technically just one day. And
Yeah.
then after that is considered postmenopause. But for the sake of what I talk about on TikTok and how I educate women, I consider menopause and postmenopause to be the same thing, just from a simplicity standpoint.
Okay. So then talk about some of the most maybe unusual signs and symptoms that women may not be attributing to menopause.
Sure. So, like you said, you've spoken about some of the main ones, but I'll just reiterate them really quickly. So, for example, weight gain is very popular in terms of like not popular, but very common. It's a very common symptom. Mood swings, weight gain, mood swings, sleep issues are very common as well. Hot flashes. About 75% of women in perimenopause or menopause have hot flashes. So, some of the less common ones would be body odor, itchiness. So a lot of women didn't realize that, our itchy ears happens to be a very big one. So itchiness, metallic taste in your mouth, burning scalp, burning tongue, BO. Like these are some that we don't really necessarily attribute to menopause, but they are inflammation in the body, joint pain, fatigue. Now, there could be some underlying reasons for it. So that's why I'm really big on speaking to your doctor and making sure that you work with a healthcare professional in terms of getting things tested. For example, your thyroid, your ferritin, your vitamin D levels, because that things are changing so much as we go into this phase of life. For example, our liver can change in volume, right? Our thyroid can change. So we want to make sure that we're always on top of our health and working with a qualified professional, doctor, healthcare provider that can help you, tell you what's going on with your body at this time.
So, hormonally behind the scenes, can you help us visualize what is going on with kind of some of those key hormones like the estrogen, the progesterone, thyroid, insulin behind the scenes of menopause causing some of these symptoms?
So what happens when we're in perimenopause is that, and this is why it's really hard to diagnose perimenopause. So I'm often asked, like, is there a test that we can actually diagnose menopause or perimenopause, like a blood test? But it's hard to do that because our hormones they're fluctuating in perimenopause itself. They're going up and they're going down. So if you get a blood test on a day that they're higher, then it might come back saying, oh no, you're totally fine, like you're not. So it's a very hard thing to determine. So that's why normally your doctor will say, okay, so what are your symptoms? So if they'll determine if you're in perimenopause by age, by symptoms, by genetics, when your mother went through it or a grandmother. So these are the things that we're looking at in terms of, let's say the word diagnosing, again, not denoting a disease, but a phase of life. So I like to say that often because it's true. It's not a disease, right? If aging is a privilege, and if we're blessed to live long enough, then as a woman, we will go through menopause, right? Or perimenopause, whether we have symptoms or not. About 13 to 15% of us actually don't have any symptoms. So that is really the determining factor as to whether how you go through it, I guess, right? But we will all go through it if we live long enough and we're blessed to live long enough. So really it's our hormones that are fluctuating, but once we get into menopause, they balance out. So they're not all over the place like they are in perimenopause.
Okay, that's really interesting. I wanted to know something. I used to have really painful PMS cramps and like period cramps. And now that I've cleaned up my lifestyle, I hardly know when my period is coming besides the fact that I'm tracking it and I'm paying more attention to kind of my hunger cues. Um, do you think that I'll experience fewer symptoms of perimenopause because I've cleaned things up earlier in life and I'm not having such severe PMS cramps? Like, do you see a correlation there between health coming into this perimenopause phase and then the menopausal symptoms, or not so much?
So here's what I'll say. So I'm not a doctor and I stay in my lane. I'm very, specific about staying in my lane, which is nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements. So in terms of like a medical, if there's an issue with your cycle or with your hormones, that's not my lane. However, what I will say is that what's important as you're going into perimenopause and menopause, and a lot of younger women will follow me too, let's say on TikTok, and they're like, okay, I'm listening. And the reason why it's important that we look at we take charge of our health when we're younger is because we really want to make sure that we're managing our stress levels. We want to make sure that we're taking care of our adrenals, because when we go into perimenopause and menopause and our ovaries take that long needed break that they deserve, our adrenal glands take over for helping to make some of our hormones or most of our hormones. So we really want to make sure that we are managing stress levels and making sure that we're eating a whole foods diet, making sure that we're avoiding the processed sugars and the refined carbohydrates, because all of that will have a massive impact on how we go through it. If it completely eliminates all your symptoms, we're also individual. Everybody is really different. So what might happen for me may not be for you, but what it will do is that it can definitely set you up for success if it'll actually, make sure like it will actually not you won't have any symptoms. That's obviously not something that I can comment on, but however, it will definitely, if you learn how to manage your stress levels, you take care of your adrenals and you nourish your adrenals, all of that will help to set you up on the right, to send you up and put you on the right path to make it easier for you.
Okay, I have a couple follow-up questions there, but let's start with the adrenals. So you said stress management is huge because
Mhm.
our adrenals kind of are the primary organ responsible for making our stress hormones. And then after our ovaries kind of quit working, then the adrenals have to pick up some of the slack for estrogen production. From a nutrient standpoint, how can we nourish our adrenals besides controlling and reducing our stress? And we're definitely going to be talking about sleep and hot flashes and some tips there. But do you have any specific nutrition advice for reducing the stress on our adrenal glands? That's not something I've ever researched or talked about before on the podcast.
I think one of the most important things that we need to keep in mind is to really limit the amount of caffeine that we're taking. There's so many of us that are drinking several cups of coffee a day, or that we need caffeine to help us to keep us going, right? So we really want to be mindful of that. We want to be mindful of how much sugar we're eating, the processed sugar. We want to be mindful about the refined carbohydrates. We want to make sure we're getting enough protein, good quality protein. We want to make sure that we're getting enough salt. So the type of salt that I really like would be Himalayan salt, which has over 70 different minerals, because so many of us are mineral deficient at this point. You want to make sure that you're getting enough magnesium. So these are all things that our body does need, our adrenal glands do need to help nourish it. And B
Awesome.
vitamins too.
Thank you for sharing those nutrients. I wanted to talk about hot flashes. I've seen some really funny posts of yours. I don't know. I think it was maybe on Instagram, but it could have been TikTok, about how to deal with hot flashes. I mean, what do you do to try to prevent them? And then if you're having one, how can you maybe reduce the severity or reduce the duration of them?
Yeah, so about 75% of women, like I mentioned, actually have hot flashes. And I was one of them, to the point where they were so bad, Morgan, I honestly couldn't even. I remember looking at my husband at one point saying, if this is how I have to live the rest of my life, I just can't do it. It's crazy the amount of like it would happen like every minute and it would last for 30 seconds. Like they are so debilitating. And they are, as we said, one of the most common symptoms of menopause or perimenopause. So the number one thing I would say is to avoid the triggers. And I actually just did a post recently on this on TikTok about this. So what are some of the big triggers of hot flashes? We know that alcohol, sugar, and caffeine are big triggers. So I know for me, if I eat chocolate, I'm not a coffee drinker, but if I eat chocolate, right away, I get a hot flash. If I have alcohol, even a sip of wine, I get a hot flash. So being mindful of what's triggering it. The other thing that can trigger it can be hot beverages. It could be spicy foods. One of the things that trigger my hot flashes that I've never heard from anyone else is washing dishes with hot water. That triggers a hot flash every single time. So I kind of joke around. I'm like, okay, so when you're washing your dishes, use cold water and take off your socks, because otherwise your body is like heating up, right? Like, or if you're in the heat, if you're outside and you're in a very warm climate, that could trigger a hot flash. So just being mindful of what the triggers are. And then when you're mindful, then either you can, you'll think twice before having it, or if you know that that can cause it, but then you're okay with it. Again, it's just being okay. Like, I know if I have this piece of chocolate, it's going to trigger a hot flash, but I want this piece of chocolate, right? So it's just understanding what can be the trigger. So in terms of helping the hot flashes, so nowadays, what's so great about menopause, and again, this isn't my lane, But there are some incredible doctors out there that specialize in hormone therapy. So something like, body identical or bioidentical hormone therapy. So if you go to the NAMS website, which is the North American Menopause Society, you could find practitioners or doctors who actually specialize. If that's a route you want to take, you can take the hormone route. Then you could take the lifestyle, the nutrition, and the supplement route. My passion is really those three: nutrition, lifestyle, and supplements. And I have found a way through nutrition, managing stress. So that's part of the lifestyle, which is stimulating our parasympathetic nervous system to help relax us. Because for a lot of women too, which part of the triggers would be anxiety and stress, right? But it becomes this vicious circle because so many of us have anxiety and stress as we're going into perimenopause and menopause. So finding ways to help relax us, help to stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system is really important. And then I would say supplements. There are some amazing supplements out there that really help. So at Morphus, we just launched 2 supplements in particular that are amazing for helping to curb hot flashes. So one of them is Pignogenol and the other one is DIM. DIM is great if you're in perimenopause. Even if you're in menopause, you just want to be mindful that it can lower estrogens in general. But DIM has been a savior for me because it literally helped with my night sweats. So I don't have them anymore, or if I do, it's very, very rarely. Just by taking those 2 supplements, it's been a game changer for me.
Andrea, can you explain a little bit more on those 2 different supplements and maybe what is in them and what they might be indicated for? And we'll be sure to drop a link to the website below. So if people want to check out the products more, they can.
Absolutely. So Pignogenol is pine bark extract, and it actually doesn't work on the hormonal system, but it's amazing for hot flashes, and it's indicated for hot flashes as well as vaginal dryness, and it also is great for anti-aging. DIM is diindolyl methane, and what's incredible about DIM is that, and we're not going to go down the whole genetics route now, but for those of you who have had your genetics tested, and if, let's say, that when your estrogens break down, they break down, let's say there's 3 different types of metabolites, estrogen metabolites. There's 2, there's 4, and there's 16. 2 being the best, 4 and 16. Again, I'm simplifying it. 4 being the worst, and then there's 16, kind of the second, not so great. So for me, for example, genetically, I will break down most of my estrogens into the 4. So I want to bring the 4 to the 2. I want to actually have it go from the 4 to the 2 to make it kind of into that better estrogen. DIM does that. And we find DIM in cruciferous vegetables. So it's excellent, excellent, excellent. But when you're taking it in a more concentrated form, it could really help with with the hot flashes and the night sweats. Like I said, it's been an absolute game changer for me. But not everyone does great on DIM. So you really have to listen to your body to see if it works for you. And by the way, that's for any supplement. Not every supplement, not every hormone therapy is going to work for everybody, right? So it's trial and error, it's experimenting. And that's a whole other conversation, Morgan, when it comes to supplements, is really understanding quality, dosage, right? When are we taking it? There's so much that goes into understanding a supplement in and of itself. And especially at this time of our lives, which is why I wanted to launch Morphus supplements, because I tried so many over the years, and some of them were actually harmful for me. They actually didn't help me at all. They made things worse. So really understanding what we should be putting in our body at this time and the quality of those ingredients, specifically for women in menopause, are important, and also understanding what type of side effects that they may have, right? So all of this is just something to keep in mind when you're looking to help yourself with anything, really, whether it's, supplements or anything else that you're trying.
Yeah, and I think what you said on listening to your body is really important. There's not a perfect program or anything like that out there. You can look and think the program or the diet's greener on the other side, but eventually you have to kind of learn how to listen to your body and listen to your thoughts and make the best decision for you. A really good example is a client of mine recently. She's on some hormone replacement therapy, and she was taking the regular version, having good results with her sleep, and then they put her on the generic version. Same thing, just a different version of it. And she's like, whoa, this is not working for me. I need to go back on the real stuff. I don't care if it's more expensive. But even things like that, going from the regular to the generic might trigger a different response. And if she wasn't listening to her body and advocating to her doctor what she wanted, she wouldn't be in this better position. So obviously listening to your body is very important in this phase of life, especially. Speaking of, I think that we need to talk more about the parasympathetic nervous system and how can we recognize the differences between whether our sympathetic nervous system is more active or our parasympathetic nervous system is more active. Explain the difference between each, and then explain how we can access that parasympathetic nervous system more to reduce our stress.
Right. So most of us live in the sympathetic nervous system. That's our that's the nervous system that's always on, it's on higher alert because it's really triggered by stress and by our life, and we're all super busy, right? So the key is you want to get from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, like you're saying. So what does that look like? So, and what it does is we want to stimulate the parasympathetic nervous system because it helps us to relax. It helps us to take it down a notch. It's better for our adrenal glands because our adrenal glands are what's to create cortisol, right? So it's this stress hormone. So if we talked earlier about our adrenal glands and nourishing them, triggering that parasympathetic nervous system is really important. So how can we do that? So the easiest and fastest way is literally meditation, deep breathing. There's something called sound baths. I don't know have you ever heard of sound baths, Morgan?
I think that I have, but I might be thinking of the wrong kind of thing. So tell me what a sound bath is.
So a sound bath is, you can even Google this, on YouTube. You'd be like you could just Google sound baths. And what it is, it's like this beautiful music. So it's vibration, it's frequency, and it's sound. And it literally immediately triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, helping us to relax. So that's a really easy one. You can buy them in your house. You can do them yourself, or you can just, like I said, Google it or listen to some apps. I know TikTok actually has some people at night. If I'm scrolling, I'll see there's this couple of amazing accounts that they're playing the sound bath. So it's just like a really soothing sound. So it helps to trigger that parasympathetic. The other way would be, so I mentioned deep breathing. If you have a hard time and you're a shallow breather, which many of us are, set a timer on your phone. So for every hour or two, right? Because we're busy, we're living our life. So maybe setting that timer to just take in, even if it's 10 breaths, just breathing in and breathing out. So just reminding ourselves. Meditation, if you can still your mind, or something called unmeditation. There's a friend of mine, her name is Lisa Borden and David Newton, and they have something called the Akira concept. And they talk about unmeditating. So it used to think, oh, you have to sit down and you have to, quiet your mind at all times to do it, but you could still get amazing benefits from unmeditating. And that could be just walking outside, but just focusing on what your intentions are. So I definitely highly recommend looking into unmeditation or the Akira concept. And then also just, spending time with family, laughing, watching a funny movie. Self-care is really important, right? So anything that's going to help you just relax, to me, is a way to stimulate that parasympathetic. And getting out in nature. Nature is so amazing to help stimulate that parasympathetic. So even if it's getting into the trees, you don't have a lot of time, finding a tree, putting your hands on the trees, all of that can just really help to relax you, and just kind of spending time with a pet, if that relaxes you as well. So all of that can really make a difference.
Well, we're not pet people in our house. We have 2 young kids. And so it's like, oh my gosh, we don't need any more responsibility. But I hear you, like sometimes pets really, really make a big difference. I'm a geriatric physical therapist, as you know. And so I love when I see older people who have a pet, and it's just like, that is what they get up for. Like their main goal is, I need to be able to take my dog outside, and it's like, it really keeps them going. So that's fun that you mentioned that. So I like the sound bath thing a lot. It kind of makes me want to get one for my house. Do you know how much they are? I should look that up. Don't know.
There's all different prices, and you can get different qualities, but there's great. I mean, you can get little ones that you'd have to just Google what the prices are, but yeah, they're pretty awesome.
The thing I saw, it was on maybe Instagram, someone's Instagram account, and they went to almost like a sound bath and crystal spa. And they had all of these different, what do you even call them? A thing, a bowl, and then you put the thing around to make the noise.
Yep, those are the sound baths.
The sound baths.
Yep.
And so they just kind of had them, all over, and they were just kind of sitting there bathing in the sound. So that's a whole new idea. I like the unmeditating idea. I don't feel like that's a strength of mine to just sit in silence. I like more of an active meditation, like focusing on future desires type of thing, versus just kind of letting everything come out of me and receiving something from like a meditation. But I know a lot of people like apps. Do you like any different meditation apps? Have you tried any?
I have, and there are a lot of different apps that you could do. Absolutely. So you can put them onto your phone, you could play them before you go to bed. So again, anything that's just going to help relax you, that's what I encourage you to try to do to stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system.
And YouTube, I think, is a great resource too. As I've gotten into more meditations and manifestation work, I think that YouTube's kind of a good resource. As you said, just on TikTok, sometimes people have those videos going. And so there's just so much free content out there, you guys. If you have an issue, just like ask a question, how can I solve this problem? Usually you will find some sort of great answer online or on podcasts, right? Like that's why we do what we do, is to help kind of provide this information and help solve these problems for people. So that was fun. I wanted to talk of any more sleep, right? So sleep is so important for stress management. So I think that this is a nice little dovetail conversation. What are your best tips for women going through perimenopause, who are struggling with those hot flashes? Obviously, avoiding the triggers, but any other specific recommendations on how they can really get good sleep?
So this is probably one of my favorite things to talk about. I call myself a menopause sleep biohacker. And the reason why is because I had a lot of issues sleeping. Like I was waking up throughout the night. I couldn't fall asleep. I just had a lot of issues. And sleep is very complex. So it's not like one thing that can fix it. In many cases, there could be, something that can help it quickly. But in many cases for women in this phase of life is they're having a lot of issues with sleep. And now I've been able to get my sleep really good, and which is amazing. So let's start with sleep hygiene, because I think that's an important place that many of us can make a difference just by incorporating some of these tips. So what does that mean? So number one, we want to make sure that our room is completely dark, because when our room is dark, it helps us, to release melatonin. Melatonin is the sleep hormone, right? So it's telling our body it's time for sleep. So we want to make sure that our room is dark, meaning if you have any LED lights on in your room, you could cover them up. There's stickers that you can get that can cover it up as well. Turning off any of if you have like a television, make sure your television's not on. Turning your phone on airplane mode so that it's not kind of, waking you up throughout the night, right? And making sure that your room is, if your room can't be dark, then you could throw on a sleep mask, but making sure you also turn down the light on your phone all the way down. So nothing that's going to interrupt or create any type of light in your room. The other thing that I recommend doing is making sure you don't eat too close to bed. And I'm going to tell, and I say this all the time. And last night, I'm going to give you a great example. Last night I was on television and I got home really late, and I wasn't as organized as I normally am, and I didn't eat properly. So I ate when I got home, which is around 9 o'clock. Way too late to eat. We want to eat. We want to make sure that we're having our meal at least 3 to 4 hours before we go to bed. Why? Because when we go to bed on a full stomach, first of all, I know a lot of people complain about getting some weird dreams or nightmares as their body is, digesting their food. But you really want to make sure you give your body a chance to digest your food so that it's not digesting while you're sleeping. So last night I had I ate, and I didn't eat a huge amount, but I ate more than I ever would before going to bed, and I had the worst night's sleep. I literally woke up exhausted. Now,
Oh,
we also know, Morgan, you're an expert when it comes to insulin resistance and blood sugar, and obviously blood sugar plays a big role in that as well. So just making sure you do not eat at least 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. You don't want to exercise too close to going to bed as well, because then you're wide awake. A couple weeks ago, I went for a walk with a friend of mine, and I got home at 11, and it was a 2-hour walk. I was wired. I could not go to bed. So just keeping these things in mind, especially if you know that your sleep can be affected by certain things that you're doing that are within your control, just kind of keep that in mind. So if you want to exercise, just maybe something that's more restorative, right? That's like a yoga or stretching, right? Just something that's not going to wake you up and give you energy before going to bed. The other thing that you really want to do, again, making sure that there's no sounds around you, and also that your room is cold. You want the optimal temperature is between 64 and 68 degrees, and you want to make sure that the room is cold, and you can cover yourself up with blankets. And because if you're going to sleep and it's hot, again, you're just not going to have a great night's sleep. So if you're having a lot of night sweats, or you're just, that you get warm during the night, there are things you could do. You could use like freezer packs on you, which is a really inexpensive way to actually keep yourself cool. But you can also there's devices that can blow air into the bed that can keep you cool. Like there's things you can get, or pads that you can lie on that can help keep you cool. But those are some examples that are really important. Staying away from alcohol before going to bed, at least 4 to 6 hours before bed, because many of us We think, and again, what worked for us before may not work for us now. So if we're drinking alcohol before going to bed, chances are it'll wake you up in the middle of the night because when it metabolizes, we will wake up. So all of these are important things to keep in mind when it comes to sleep hygiene, making sure you have the right pillow, making sure you have the right mattress. You don't want to be sleeping on a mattress that's like, 20 years old, right? So you're setting yourself up for success, which is I say start there because all of that can make a really big difference.
Yeah, my friends have this really fancy mattress that sets their temperature for them. Like, well, wouldn't that be cool to have? We're not to that level. I think earplugs, I know you said make it quiet. Earplugs
Yep.
really help me get a much deeper sleep. And then the other thing, do you do any blue light blocking? Because those really help me. The amber, the super dark colored blue light blocking glasses help me sleep. Um, I've heard of magnesium soaks too before bed for like a calming approach.
Yep,
I
you can take a bath exactly using Epsom salts, so magnesium sulfate before bed that helps to relax. Magnesium's excellent at relaxing the muscles, and but 70 to 80% of us are deficient in it. So exactly, taking a bath in it, throwing some lavender, maybe a drop of lavender oil, putting some lavender oil in your hands, smelling it, putting it on your pillow. Anything that's just going to help relax you. My brother loves reading a book, like an actual book before bed, because to him, he says it just makes him nod off. It puts him to bed. So whatever is going to help to make you fall asleep or help you get to sleep, because it is such a big issue for so many that, there's the I have trouble falling asleep, and then there's the I have trouble staying asleep, right? Or it could be both for many of us. So, things even like, supplements like L-theanine is awesome to help relax you. Magnesium, awesome for helping with sleep. And I've literally created I call it a sleep protocol from Morphus, because I have been, like I said, been researching sleep for now like a few years already. And I've literally understood what we need to help us fall asleep, and then what we need to help keep us asleep. And it's if we don't have our sleep, like you mentioned, Morgan, like everything is thrown off. We're eating more throughout the day. We're exhausted throughout the day, and it just leads to a cascade of things. So it is probably the most important thing that we need, but one of the main things that most of us are lacking.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, but before I do, I think sleep and sunshine are two of the most underrated things in just
Absolutely.
health, advocacy. But you mentioned a lot of things there. And I think that I wanted to talk about if you had any other tips or which ones specifically would be helpful for staying asleep, because you do hear that sometimes. I cannot stop waking up at 2 or 3. And sometimes I can go back to bed and sometimes I can't. What are some of the major causes for that waking in the middle of the night? One
Yep.
that we didn't discuss, I'd be interested on your opinion, is fluid reduction after dinner, and
Mhm.
if you recommend kind of limiting fluids. So any other tips for that?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. So making sure, so if you know that you're waking up to go to the bathroom several times a night, be mindful of how much you're drinking before bed. So just small sips of water if you're taking supplements before bed, making sure you're not having, a whole huge mug of whatever fluid that you're drinking, just being mindful of it. But I do know a lot of women who say that even if they're not drinking too much before bed, they're still waking up to pee during or go to the bathroom throughout the night. So then they want to look at things that are going to increase vasopressin, which is an antidiuretic hormone, which is, higher during the day, but then decreases at night for some women. So I think, in terms of beverages, yeah, I love that idea. So again, maybe 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed in terms of drinking a lot, or stopping after dinner, stop drinking too much, a lot after dinner. The other thing that's keeping us awake, or so if you're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., it could be blood sugar dysregulation, whether your blood sugar maybe is going too high or too low, that's going to wake you up. And then and also cause you to go to the bathroom. And then the other thing is cortisol. So that takes us back to what we talked about, the adrenal glands. So as we're going into perimenopause and menopause, we talked that our adrenal glands are taking over. And now if we're going into perimenopause and menopause, talking about the sympathetic, right? We're running on sympathetic all the time. Our adrenal glands at this point are like exhausted. They're like, I'm so tired. And now I need to take over and run the show. Help, So this is where, with cortisol, if we're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., chances are it's your cortisol that's rising at the wrong time. So it comes back again to making sure you're doing as much stress management that you can. You're making sure that you're relaxing, you're stimulating that parasympathetic as much as you can, getting the right nutrients to nourish your adrenal glands, like we talked about before. So you see how everything is so interconnected that it's like, again, coming back to your question of what can we do before we get to this phase? try to, again, stress management, so important. But when you're in this phase, there are still a lot of things you can do to help relax yourself and make sure that you're keeping those cortisol levels lower.
The other thing that we didn't mention is morning sunlight. So I think that that can be really helpful. Do you think to reset that circadian rhythm,
Circadian. Yeah,
have you
exactly.
seen
So yeah,
any
making sure.
have you seen any research on how that might impact the cortisol too? Like if it's spiking, between 2 to 4 a.m. I just didn't know if you'd seen any research on if morning sunlight can kind of help someone sleep all the way through the night better or reduce that cortisol spike at the wrong time.
Well, what it does is it resets the circadian rhythm, right? So that's why when we wake up in the morning, it's really important that we try to get, and most of us don't get that sunlight, right? We're in
Yeah,
our homes, we're working from home, and so many of us are not going to the office anymore, right? So
yeah.
we are in our homes, we're not going outside and getting that direct sunlight. But yeah, so important to help reset that circadian rhythm to help us sleep better. It's like key.
Okay. I think we covered some really good things here. I know we didn't touch a ton on nutrition, but we did do the big picture. Was there anything else that you really wanted to share today about how we can have the successful transition from premenopause to perimenopause through menopause, or anything else you wanted to share about the summit coming up?
I just think it's important to be mindful of what we're putting in our body, make sure that we're focusing on whole foods because our body recognizes whole foods, avoiding ingredients. Like we wrote a book called Unjunk Your Junk Food. I wrote a book in 2011 called Unjunk Your Junk Food. And we talked about ingredients. We called them the Scary Seven at the time. These are ingredients that we know our body, they're not good for our body. And this was all according to research. It was published by Simon and Schuster, and basically avoiding foods like MSG, which is monosodium glutamate, which, by the way, we know some of the side effects that people report from consuming MSG are heart palpitations or excessive sweating or headaches. So if you look at those side effects and then you look at the side effects or the symptoms, the sign and symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, a lot of the time it crosses over. So making sure that you're avoiding these ingredients. So like MSG, high fructose corn syrup, which we know can lead to insulin resistance, right? We know that food coloring and artificial flavors and artificial sweeteners, all of those play a big role, certain preservatives. So just being mindful, again, what we're putting in our body, understanding how to read food labels is important. And then also looking at seed oils. I mean, I'm absolutely the biggest fan of Dr. Kate Shanahan, and she talks about seed oils and how those impact our health because they take up space in the cells and they don't allow the nutrients in, and they can lead to inflammation in the body. So I would just say being very mindful of what we're putting in our body at this time, but also what we're putting on our body as well. So avoiding parabens and phthalates because we absorb 60% of what we put on our body.
I don't think I've ever heard that stat before. We absorb 60% of what we put on our body. It's a little
Yep.
scary. It
Yep.
is. So I think those are all really good things. The more I learn about seed oils, the scarier, the more I want them out of my house. I recently did a pantry clean out, and I asked for forgiveness, not permission, from my husband to throw away like all of our condiments because I think people hear that and maybe they've heard a lot of different things. But what's really important is that you actually take action. Change does not just happen because you're listening to a podcast or you're watching this on YouTube. And honestly, just really scanning those food labels for the seed oils. What should people look for? Because it's not going to say seed oil on the ingredients. What is it going to say?
No, so you really want to avoid seed oils so for example, canola, soy, sunflower, safflower, right? These are oils that a lot of these companies, even organic or natural companies, are switching to these because they're removing canola oil and they're or also known as rapeseed oil, and they're switching to sunflower and safflower because we think they're healthier oils. But these oils are still considered seed oils, especially if they're really highly processed. And Dr. Kate, again, she's the expert on all this and one of the lead researchers. This is her stuff. Like I adore her. I think she's brilliant. And she would say, stay away from the grapeseed oil, the corn oil. So she has a full list of oils that are like absolute stay away from, and then also these are okay. So what I would say focus on would be olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, Malaysian palm fruit oil. That'll have like a neutral effect. So you really want to stick to the three, like the coconut, the avocado, and the olive oil, especially if you're making your food at home. Just focus on using those and you'll feel a lot better. And here, this is what's interesting to me, Morgan, and why I give Dr. Kate so much credit was because before I had interviewed her and heard even what's about seed oils, is I thought, hey, you know what? I'm a nutritionist. I'm doing everything I can to eat the way, that I feel that will make my body feel good. But I had like, I would wake up in the morning and I would have pain at the bottom of my foot, kind of like pins and needles almost when I would get out of bed. And I could not understand what it is. I'm like, I'm not, I cut out, everything that I thought my body doesn't want or isn't good for me. And then when I interviewed her, she's like, just take the seed oils out of your diet. And I was like, interesting, but where would they be? So I went and I looked at all the packaging because I'm an avid label reader, but I miss things. And I saw that one of my seaweed packages I had bought at a Costco, and I was eating at least one or two of these a day. We need iodine, one of the major minerals that we all need, right? Like iron or magnesium or zinc. We need iodine for our thyroid health and also our reproductive health. And it had sunflower oil in it, but I didn't realize it. And I was eating this every single day. I removed it from my diet. And can I tell you, I have no pain in my body now. Like I don't have the pain or the pins and needles under my feet. And you can literally change and you can feel better within a couple of weeks. Like it happens pretty quickly and you'll see. And now if I by accident have canola oil or soy oil, I will feel it in my body. And what I love about this tip, by the way, or any of these tips about avoiding these ingredients like the Scary Seven or the seed oils is that it doesn't cost you any money. It just basically it's like a free way to be like, okay, let me just read my labels. Let me stay away from things. Or like maybe I can make things at home from scratch a little bit more, even though I know it's not convenient for everybody. I get it. I'm running a few companies. I have 3 kids. Like we're all super busy. But if you're in pain or you feel like you're inflamed or you're having really a lot of signs and symptoms at this stage, it's something you may want to incorporate more often into your life. Like maybe you could make 1 meal out of 3 a day, just slowly. And I'm not an advocate for changing everything at once.
Yeah,
I
me too.
really am an advocate for baby steps and just understanding. And I'll never tell you, you have to do this or you have to eat that way. That's not my style. My style is education. I share information, but at the end of the day, you're the captain of your own ship. You're the one that makes the decision. So maybe trying something, baby steps. If it works, great. If it doesn't, try something else. And that's really what my mantra is just really listen to yourself.
Yep. And I think there's always other levels. It's like when I started this whole journey, I was learning about macronutrients, tracking fat, tracking protein, tracking carbohydrates. And then there's a whole nother level when you start looking at the different types of fats. And it's like, that's why just tracking macronutrients is not enough for some people to really see results, because you still could be eating all of these inflammatory seed oils that are fats and thinking that they're healthy, but they're not. And I just want to really encourage everyone who's out there watching or listening that better health is possible for you. Andrea and I have no pain. Like we feel great. We have sustained energy all day long. And we help people reach these levels too. And so like, if you're just super tired, listening, watching, just pick one thing, like one thing that we talked about today, and start there. But you never, ever, ever have to try to implement everything at once, because that's kind of a recipe for disaster.
And it's
Uh,
overwhelming. It
it's
becomes overwhelming, right?
it's counterproductive. Yes. So no matter where you're starting, pick one thing we talked about today. Maybe it's activating that parasympathetic nervous system with one of those tips, or a tip to improve your sleep, or screening your ingredients for those refined seed oils or added sugar. But start somewhere and really commit to that. I like to say a week. A weekly action item is a great way to do it. And then if you add it up, you've had 52 changes over a year. So baby steps definitely add up, and the results do compound. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Anything else you want to share? Any other information about the summit?
Oh, I would just encourage you to sign up for the summit. It's a free summit. We have over 40 different experts, including yourself, Morgan, and who I've interviewed, we've covered so many different topics about how we can help you in this phase of life. I am so excited about it. And I just want to see you. Hopefully we'll see you all there. And if you have any questions, you could find me on TikTok. You can DM me on Instagram at Andrea Donsky. I answer my DMs. If you have any questions or any, and you have any, comments, I'm always listening. And I just would love to see you all there.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Andrea. We will link up all the resources in the show notes for today's episode on the blog. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'm excited for the summit.
Thanks, Morgan. You too.